Hello, friend, and welcome to the Spooky Chris podcast. My name is Chris Ringler. I'm your aforementioned Spooky Chris, and I welcome you and appreciate you popping by. I thought I would talk about Stranger Things now that it's wrapped up, and I'm sure it's something that everyone's tongues have been wagging about. But hopefully, I have something at least unique to add to the conversation. It was interesting on the lead up. My wife and I just had finished it a few days ago. And it's been interesting in the lead up to this how so much of the fan opinion turned negative and turned very cynical. And as the show released in its kind of 3 parts, how the love that had been so strong for the show turned into a strong disdain and near almost hatred for it. And it's been fascinating because you saw the same thing happen with Game of Thrones, and it happens with other shows and other properties as well. Like everything, it feels a little. It's not 1-to-1, but it feels a little like the punk band that gets big, and the fans that were into them early on. Before they were popular and had more opportunities, and had bigger shows and everything, and people liked that. They liked feeling like they were in on a secret that no one else knew, and that was kind of what Stranger Things was when it first popped up. It was this curiosity. It was supposed to be kind of Stephen King-ish about a mystery in this small town and a missing child, and nobody knew what it was. It was from the Duffer Brothers weren't really known. And this property wasn't known. It was just going to be on Netflix, and who knew? And there's a magic in that. The discovery is always is magic. Back when me and a bunch of friends put on a horror convention the first year, like there was magic to it, and there was so much goodwill and so much love from people. We didn't do gangbusters business, but it just people had a good feeling from it, and we did them afterwards, and it would never turned sour as far as I could ever tell. But you can't ever recapture that initial magic because it's the idea that people didn't think you could do what you said you were going to do, and you did it. And with Stranger Things, they were trying to be this strange, kind of unique show that captured kind of the feel of the 80s. They had that synth intro that reminded you of Carpenter and kind of the horror films of the early to mid 80s, and it had a vibe, and it had like an intriguing story. And as it went along, the story expanded and it got bigger, and people loved it. I think one of the problems was that when these kids, people got so attached to the kids, but once the kids, A, start growing up, and B, start doing other projects and becoming, real live people, and people have to deal with them as real live people, there's blowback. I feel terrible for Millie Bobby Brown, because she could be the best or the worst person on earth. It doesn't matter. But because she has taken, the opportunity of Stranger Things and spun it into, her own businesses, into other roles and other things, and she's kind of, gotten her own thing going, people have gotten sick of her. And they hate on her for an accent that she has said, hey, I grew up partially in Europe, in the UK, and so I have this accent. And they go, oh, it's a fake accent. Ugh. And as she got older, she first came into view as a young teenager, and then as she grew, and now she's a grown woman, married with an adopted child, and now, she looks old. She looks like a tramp. She just, and it's funny because we've seen this before, like dozens of times with actors, actresses, and musicians, where they're, especially when they're growing up and they're in a box for so long, and they're infantilized almost. Like it's weird for young women because they're infantilized, but they're also sexualized. So it's kind of like, well, we want you to always be a little girl, but kind of a sexy little girl, just a little, it's creepy and it's weird. And with her, like, and like many other creatives that have gone through, been grown up in the public eye, she, and it's funny because she hasn't even really done anything per se, like a Christina Aguilera from doing Genie in a Bottle to Dirty. Like, it's not that big of a jump, or Britney Spears kind of, from when she popped up to her later work, where she embraced her sexuality and her maturity. It hasn't been anything like that with her. It's just been, hey, I'm a woman. Like, I'm going to change how I look, how I dress. And it's, I'm sure she got tired of being associated solely with the character of Eleven. And I feel bad for her because she gets so much just hate and all of this negativity when she's just living her life. And she's in the public eye, and unfortunately that draws people's attention. But it's weird that the cost of that is like this ceaseless clucking of tongues. That's not about her work. That's not about anything outside of how she looks or how they perceive she is. And I feel bad for her for that. All of these young people, all of them, all of the cast, it's. I'm sure Winona Ryder loved having all of her past faux pas and foibles that were very public in the day brought up yet again as when she took the role, and she the show took off, and then like, oh, Winona Ryder, who's having a career resurgence after blah blah blah. That's the Americans love a good celebrity fall from grace and then return like a phoenix, because in part of it, I think, because they feel like they can, like, well, I guess I'll forgive you, but just remember the power I hold. So it's a bummer that the show had the baggage it did leading to this last season. And I think anytime you're going to have a conclusion to a running storyline that's been several seasons in the making, no matter what it is, people are going to be upset because they're bummed out to see it go. It's never going to live up to whatever their idea of it should be, which is just, again, always funny, because I just don't know what worlds people like. I want it to be this and that, and it should have been this. Like, never having read the Game of Thrones books, never read them. Watched the show, I liked it. I liked how it ended. Was I 100% on board? No. And I absolutely, we could break down issues I and everyone else has with it. We don't have to love it, but I liked it. It was fine. Again, it wasn't what I would have, wasn't the how I would have done it, I guess. I don't know, but it was what it was. It's fine. But man, people got in their feelings about it. And I get it. You invest yourself, but it's like, it's a show. Like, in the end, it's a show. It's fine. I don't need to see every so many months, like, the show brought up as just shy as if it, like, kicked someone's infant into an icy river kind of thing. Like, oh, terrible's the worst ever. Fine, whatever. And we kind of saw the same thing with Stranger Things, and people just, their attitudes turned and like, oh. And it was funny because even going into the last season, I was ambivalent about it. And the problem is this, and the problem is kind of they made it themselves, and this is on the Duffer Brothers. The show got too big. It got too big, and they got kind of too big in their britches almost. Like, once you start like, oh, we're going to have a spinoff over here, and then we might do the spinoff over here. And I get it, because that's how you get deals done with your, production partner. Netflix is like, oh, hey, is there anything you'd like to pitch Duffer Brothers? Oh, gosh, yeah, we want to do Talisman. Womp womp. It's like, oh, cool, Talisman. That's interesting. Like, let's talk about this. But, do you have any other ideas for stuff we could do with Stranger Things? So, of course, we have an animated show coming, and it may be great. I don't know. I just don't know that there's that much meat on the bone anymore. I don't know if there's that much to say after it's been said. And there's talk of other spinoffs, and it feels like The Walking Dead. Walking Dead is a perfect example where it was a lovely show. I loved it. We had friends that would come over on Sundays and we'd get together and watch it. And then you lost a lot of people when you had the infamous cliffhanger where you knew at least one character was going to buy it, and it turned out to be two, and that just. I remember that whole, which I mean, it shows how powerful the show was. I remember that whole summer I was just like had a knot in my stomach, kind of like, oh, I don't want to know what's going to happen. And it was Bad News Bears. But then they killed off a character that they didn't need to kill off because the person wanted to go and go to college basically, and they started changing things drastically. And it felt like it was funny. I have a friend, and he read the series, and it's basically just like, basically try to survive, like fight a faction, try to survive, fight a faction, and that's what it was. And it was funny because we tapped out. And I still have never seen the end. Like, we watched part of one of the offshoots, but like it became so much about all of this shared universe and like all these shows and all this, like making it bigger and bigger and bigger. And it didn't need to be, and it shouldn't have been that long. And I in my heart of hearts, I feel like Stranger Things should have been like a 3-season show. I just don't feel like it needed this much, and it didn't need to be this big. And that's my biggest knock on the final season, is it was good, but it felt like it was just being expansive and big to be big. And I feel like the power of the show was in the kids and in their relationship and in how they all lived together. But once you made it, you started, and really that started happened when they brought in Russia and they took Hopper overseas and did all this crazy stuff. Like, you suddenly, it just felt too big, and it felt like too much. And they're trying to make this giant world-killing, like, oh my God, what is this? What is so expansive? And it worked better as an intimate, to me, it worked better as an intimate story and as a story about these kids and about kind of like growing up and surviving and also trying to, save one another and to try to stop this evil. And I just feel like they let it get too big, and it didn't. And it also didn't help with the long wait between seasons, where anything. And it's funny that every time there's something with kids, like, they seem to forget that it's going to be more than one project. They seem to forget that, like, from 12 to 18, kids grow and change so much, and maybe even before that, like with their voices and their bodies and everything else. And it's just. So by the time we came back to these, and it's funny to think, like, so between season 4 and 5 of Stranger Things, back to Millie Bobby Brown, like, she went from a young woman to a woman married with a child. like that's just, it's funny because, happens and stuff, but like, I don't even think she had met her husband by the time they were doing season 4 and 4 came out and everything. So it's just crazy. They just took so long to put it together. It was just, by the time it gets there, it feels like you feel the age on them. And you feel like, these aren't really, I'm not buying that these are 16, 17-year-olds anymore. Like, they all feel real old. And it hampers the show, because the whole time, again, you feel like these kids they feel like grown-up adults now. Like, these are adults, and feels weird. But okay, whatever you want to do, like, and you got to finish it. I get it, but like, again, I think they want to make it so epic, and part of it, I think, is chasing Stephen King and that kind of epicness. They want this big, epic battle, and they got in their own heads like, well, geez, we built this up so much, we got to have this big, giant thing. We've got to have all this stuff. And it didn't need to be this big. It didn't need to be that expensive. It didn't need to be, like, you could have cut seasons. And I don't think it would have. I mean, it wouldn't have. I think it would have tightened up the story. And that's my biggest problem. Is that there's lots of, in the final season specifically, there's lots of like, kind of like, okay, and then it's like, it just, and it feels like we didn't even need that many episodes of it. Like 3. You could cut hours off of it, like 3 episodes, maybe hour and a half a piece, and you could have probably wrapped this thing up, but whatever. overall, I liked it. I like the series. It's a great series because it shows like the cultural impact. It was fun. It was scary. It introduced all these new monsters and worlds. It really did capture the vibe of the 80s and the vibe of Stephen King, of that era. And it's really, and those kids were great. The kids were great in it, as were the adults. Like some wonderful storytelling and really fun. And if, people can get out of their heads about it, like, it's really good stuff. Like, again, and I don't know how it wraps up. I like it. It's very emotional. I think the stakes could have been leading up to it. I think the stakes could have been higher, and I think on a personal level, and I think it's one of those things where they just fell too in love with all of their characters and didn't do certain things they maybe should have. Which, whatever, man, you do you. But it's funny because all the people that just won't watch the series and won't even finish it and have no interest, and they've tapped out, and it's just like, man, if you've invested this much, just finish it at this point. But again, I guess though, if you're not going to give it a fair shake, then why bother? If you're going to go in kind of in deciding like, no, this is, I'm out, then don't waste your time, don't waste anybody's time. Just, don't bash it undeservedly because you don't know. And it's a shame too, because we are such, because of streaming, and we are such just like carnivorous consumers. Nothing really sits with us anymore. So we don't have to wait for episodes. We don't go and talk about the stuff for a week or however long and just kind of like mull it over and talk like, oh my gosh. And especially like wrapping up this show, like you had, I think, 3 or 4 episodes right, on one date, and then you had like a week, and then the next couple, and then like a week later, the final one. So that was interesting in that you kind of spanned it out a little bit, but you could just sit down and watch them. I just did that with Wonder Man. I sat down and watched the whole series. Very fun series, P.S. Just saying. And I don't know if you can, like, it's kind of like getting like your favorite dish, like your favorite meal, really big meal, and just plowing through it because you're just starving. And you want to just consume it, but I don't know if you're enjoying it. So I don't know, like, all of us that are just plowing through these shows and stuff, I don't know how much we're enjoying them as so much as consuming them. And in the consumption, I don't know if we're really thinking about them and feeling them. And the hope is, over time, you do. Like, but I don't know. Like, I can't say I have thought a ton about Stranger Things since we finished it. I can't say it's stuck in my head. Again, it was lovely. And there's actually, with the ending and stuff, there's stuff to talk about. But I just don't know if, and I'm going to bash on anybody. I don't know if I certainly don't think it goes in the legendary endings kind of things and all that. And I think that's just because there's no way they could have landed the plane without losing a wheel or two, just because they made this thing so big that it would have been hard. But that's not to say it's satisfying. So you can still push back from the table and go, that was a good meal. Like, that was a satisfying meal. I'm happy. But in how much we consume and how quickly we consume, a lot of that stuff, it just kind of, and you don't really have time to think about it, and you don't really let it digest. We just kind of move on to the next because there's always something else. And the way streaming works is like every week there's some big movie or some big show or something that you have to. I mean, it's kind of the Tiger King thing. When that came out, is like that hit that COVID summer, and everybody's like, oh gosh, we got to watch it. Have you seen it? Oh gosh, I got to go. And within a couple months, everybody had watched it and consumed it, and we're over it and we're gone. And it's just the life cycle of these things is very short. So I hope in the future that people return to Stranger Things and discover it again, or discover it for the first time, because it's a good show. I'm curious how it would play to a first time viewer, in watching it kind of without having to wait many years. I wonder how it will feel, and if it will feel awkward with the kind of the pauses. Because there's ways to do it. And they did their best. But again, it doesn't help that you have these young people that are growing and changing and stuff so drastically. So I'm just not sure. But it's overall it's such a good show, and it was a fun, spooky show. And I don't know if we need to ask more of it than that to be fun and spooky. Added a ton to the pop culture of the time. I don't know if it'll stand the test of time, like I say, but we're also, the way we're built now, we're moving on quick. And I mean, that's kind of one of the things why they want to sequelize everything and franchise everything, is to keep it in the public mind and keep it in the zeitgeist. It's like, oh, well, oh, I know that. And because we are so short memory, such short-term memory now, they want to keep us talking about it. But last season was action-packed. There was a lot going on, surprisingly gory at times. All the characters got moments, and it's so much. And it's funny because in the last couple episodes, like, it really felt like they were working real hard to make sure everybody had moments together that needed to have moments together. Like the whole thing would stop basically, and like, hey, I needed to talk to you about something. Oh, did you? I needed to hear something. And then they have a long heart-to-heart. And then it's like, that was great. Oh, my gosh, let's go. And that happens a few times. It's just like, girl, the world's ending right now. Like, maybe y'all could talk about this later. I'm just saying. And it's another one where they keep splitting everybody up. And they try to, they give them time together. But they keep, splitting everyone up and this and that. And it feels almost forced. But again, I think that goes back to, I don't know that it needed to be this big. I don't think it needed to be, like, I think you could have told a similar type of story without, like, the special effects and the sets and the giant, casts and stuff. But as it wrapped up, man, it was good. It was a fun show. I'm glad we got a chance to see it. I'm glad none of it was ruined really for me. Like, sort of something was about the ending, sort of, because it's just hard not to, see things like, spoilers at this point. And I get it. Like, Arkle's just talking about stuff. Like, it's on me to shield my eyes from it, and not on them to not discuss it. It's good to, that they try to discuss these things. And like I said, I hope folks return to it and come to it with new eyes. I hope it stands the test of time in some way. It deserves it. It's a unique show. I think if we could if we could all take a few steps back, and revisit it, I think we might have a better appreciation. It's just, I think after a kind of a cliffhanger final, fourth season that was such a big season. And then you had such a long wait, and then, how it came out, and just, everybody had grown up and everything. It's weird. And then, like, everybody's trying to start their own separate careers and stuff. And gosh, as a culture, we really just don't like when kids grow up and then, like, oh, hey, I want to be a musician. I want to be an actor, whatever. I want to get into business, whatever they want to do. And people are like, ugh, why can't you just act? Why can't you just be a kid forever? So I feel for all those kids, because, that it ain't easy having the public opinion kind of always, and especially, they have been done with this show for a year or change, like, essentially with the main shoot, like, at least a year. So they've all moved on. They have other projects and are doing other things, and one of them has directed film, and they've been in other movies, and they have other things going on, and so they have to kind of go back to that when they've all moved on. So that's got to be weird. But I hope you enjoyed it if you were a fan, and if you're not, then hey, Stranger Things. Why did you listen to this podcast? Like, I had nothing to give you but Stranger Things. Strange things all up and down, my friend. I appreciate you listening. I will be back soon with some more conversations with pretty awesome folks. You can find all of my podcasts, all of my stories, my blogs, my reviews, and all of the links to all 20-something of my books at spookychris.com. You can find my podcast on your least favorite podcasting app or site. I appreciate you listening, and I will talk to you soon. Take care.